Hello friends, Happy New Year, Happy 2022. I am really hoping that 2022 treats us all better than the last 2 years have because we need it. We really need it. It's the new year, which means a lot of people are putting out goals videos and talking about the goals that they want to accomplish with their reading this year. And honestly, I love goals videos. I love making goals, but I don't know how to stick to a goal. I think the problem is that I don't really reflect on those goals even halfway through the year or a quarter of the way through the year. I reflect on those goals at the very end of the year, basically the same time in which I made those goals the year prior, and I've forgotten them. I don't know how to hold myself accountable for something that I'm not really reflecting on regularly. So this year I decided, because if you've been around, you know, I've made a few attempts at creating video series where I'm reading down my physical TBR, because one of my major goals every single year since the dawn of time has been to read down my physical TBR. And I'm aware that at the rate in which books I'm interested in are published and the rate in which I read and the amount of books that I already have on my TBR, it's not going to be possible to get to zero. But I would really like to make a serious attempt this year to read more books on my physical TBR than I buy. And it's not me stopping myself from buying books. I'm not going to put myself on a book buying ban because historically speaking, that doesn't work, and that's fine. That's just who I am as a human. I did decide that this year, instead of making myself a bunch of different goals that I probably won't stick to, my overall goal, my one goal, is to read down my physical TBR, and I'm going to do that in 3 different ways. So I'm creating 3 different video series on my channel that you'll be introduced to throughout this month, actually, that all focus on reading down my physical TBR. So this video is called Read It Down, and this is kind of like a TBR game, but not really. I'm not playing a game, but my friends are. They're playing a game with my emotions. So basically, Read It Down is loosely a game where I ask my friends to pick 2 books off of my unread TBR that I have to read in a month. So every single month it's going to be a different person, and they get to pick 2 books. And then for fun, but also because I'm a horrible mood reader, I decided that I will get to pick the 3rd book, because initially I was going to have them pick 3 books for me, but then I realized that I am such a mood reader and I'm already trying to really hold myself accountable to reading down my physical TBR, that I would allow myself to be able to pick the 3rd book so that I can pick whatever I'm in the mood for, especially if, I don't know, one of my friends decides to pick 2 books in the same genre and I'm in the mood for another genre. At least I have that leeway to pick the one book, because there are consequences to me not reading these books. So essentially, even though I say I'm not going to put myself on a book buying ban, I'm not going to do that for a full year. But if I don't read the 2 books that my friend chooses in a particular month, then the following month I am on a book buying ban, except for pre-orders. If I have pre-orders for that month, I don't have to go cancel them or anything. I still can get those pre-orders, but I cannot go to a bookstore and buy new books for myself. Now, that doesn't mean that somebody can't buy me books, like my partner. And I say that if I don't finish my friend's books, then I'm getting punished. But also, if I don't finish the book that I choose, the punishment still stands. And this punishment stands in place until I've caught up on all the books that I've read. So, for example, if one friend chooses 2 books in January and then I choose the 1 book and I only got to 1 of the 3 books in January, I have to then push those books into February on top of reading the books that my next friend chose in February along with the book that I choose in February. So it could be really bad. And I would say that there's a prize for me finishing the 3 books, but the prize is that I am fulfilling one of my goals, which is to read down my physical TBR. So to start Read It Down off, I decided to ask Yasmin, who is one of my best friends, to pick my first 2 books for January. And I already have a bad feeling that they're going to be really chunky fantasies, because I'm pretty sure she said one of them we're buddy reading. So I basically know what it is. But let's watch the video together.
Hi, my name is Yasmin from Yasmin Be Reading, aka Steph's favourite person on the whole entire planet. So Steph has kindly let me pick 2 books for her to read from her physical TBR, and there were hundreds of books. So I have picked 2 books, and because I like watching Steph suffer, I have picked 2 of the biggest books on her TBR. So the first book I'm making her read is The Way of Kings by Brandon Sanderson. This is a very fat book, and it's also one of my favourite series in the whole entire world, the Stormlight Archive. So I want you to read this book, Steph. I hope you enjoy it. And the next book I'm making her read is The Sword of Kaigen by M.L. Wang. And I've never read this book before, but I've heard amazing things, and I want to read it too, so we can read it together. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed these 2 books, and yeah.
She hates me. Oh my god. I have to go get the books. This though, I can't believe I actually was not expecting this. And I feel really stupid for not expecting it, because she kept telling me that I should expect both of them, but especially one of them, which I'm assuming is this. And somehow I still did not expect it. When I tell you, I don't think she's wrong about the fact that this is the longest book on my TBR. 1,001 pages. Brandon Sanderson, what are you doing? So we're reading The Way of Kings. I'm so nervous about this because it's so big, but also because I've actually read very little Brandon Sanderson, and so, you know, you might as well just dive right in. Anyway, but I'm actually really, really excited about The Sword of Kaigen. Well, I guess I'll be picking a smaller book for later in the month. Hello friends. So I was looking at my shelves to see what I was going to pick for my mood read book, and I figured that there was only one author that I could read that would fit really well for Yasmin's video, and that's Nadia Korafor, because one of the first vlogs that I ever watched of Yasmin's was her 24-hour readathon, and by this time we were getting closer. We were slowly but surely becoming besties, and one of the books that she read in that 24-hour readathon was Binti, which is also by Nadia Korafor. And I remember commenting on that and telling her how much I love Binti, and then, this is probably not accurate, but at least from that point on, I think we talked all the time. This is the newest release by Nadia Korafor that I've really been looking forward to. So I decided that it was the perfect read because it's small. I love Nadia Korafor, and so does Yasmin. So this is gonna be my mood read for this vlog. Anyway, this is 211 pages. I know that this is supposed to be about an AI, or an AO. What is the difference? Which I think will be interesting because AI stories don't always work well for me, but I trust Nadia Korafor. So there's a person that keeps running down the street. I wonder if they're just running around the block over and over again, because I've seen them run by 3 times now. Anyway, I'm gonna go start Noor, and I will update you when I have some thoughts. Hello, I was actually gonna film today, which is why I have a face of makeup on, but I've been really struggling with headaches recently. I always kind of have struggled with it, not always. It's actually in the last couple of years. It feels like a lifetime, but it's only been the last couple of years that I have been struggling really, really badly with headaches and migraines. I call them headaches, but they are definitely migraines. They can last for days. Yeah, so like the last 2 weeks, I feel like I've only had one day where I haven't had a headache. And I thought today was going to be that day, so I was ready to film. I got up, I showered, got ready. Well, I got this much done. I got this much done, which isn't saying much, and then my headache started to set in again, once again. So I decided to lay on the couch and start watching Wheel of Time. I know. I am behind on Wheel of Time. I'm surprised that I haven't seen any spoilers about the show. I think I've seen one spoiler, but if you watch the first episode, you kind of already see it coming, I feel like. Anyway, I'm halfway through the second episode, and let me tell you, I've had my phone open the whole time messaging Yasmin about about all my thoughts and feelings, and all I have to say is Lan's booty cheeks. Didn't expect that. Not complaining. Didn't expect it. I'm actually really loving the show. If you don't know, Yasmin and I do live shows every couple of months about the books. We're buddy reading them together. We're hopefully gonna buddy read the entire series together. But I say hopefully because if you don't know, I'm the one who's struggling with this series. I think Yasmin is liking it more and more as we read the books, but I'm still struggling to connect with this, not necessarily the world, but like the characters that we're heavily following. I didn't connect with them in the beginning, and I'm still having trouble. I'm definitely liking the books more as you get further into the story. I definitely like the show more than I like the books so far. And I know that's a controversial opinion, but like, I think that you can like them equally as much, and maybe I'll grow to appreciate the book series more after watching the show. I don't think like you have to love the book more than a TV show. Like, they're two different forms of media, and they're doing different things. Like, the storyline is there, but it's also different, and they're adding a bunch of things, and I'm just really appreciative of it. And I'm really appreciative of the diversity that they added into the show, even though I keep seeing complaints about it. And to be honest, get a hobby, people, please. But yeah, so far I'm liking it more. It's really not what I expected at all. To be completely honest, I thought that it was just going to be another Game of Thrones, and they definitely knew what they were doing. They knew that they did not want to be a Game of Thrones, because I don't think it has Game of Thrones vibes, especially because of like how it's filmed. There's a lot of reasons I feel like it doesn't have Game of Thrones vibes, but I think especially because of like how it's filmed and the tone of it is a bit different. I will say though, the Trollocs are hilarious looking to me. I don't hate it, but I fear for Loyal's life. I fear for you, Loyal. What are you gonna look like? I don't think he's gonna look great. As a matter of fact, I put on Twitter that I was watching the show, and I'm pretty sure Jess mentioned that Loyal doesn't look great. So I'm very scared, because Loyal is one of my favorite characters. the same spot because I finished episode 2 and then I had to watch like the first quarter of episode 3 because this show loves to end on cliffhangers. And then the first 15 minutes of every episode is so intense, like something intense happens in the first 15 minutes of every episode, even though I can't remember if something intense happened in the first 15 minutes of the first episode. Anyway, I have to give it to the show because it has me completely captivated. But I actually really want to read because I don't think I gave an update, but I started the Sword of Kaigen and I'm like 140 pages in. I can't stop reading this book. It's all I think about. I love this book so much. I'm so invested. It reminds me of the Greenbone saga in so many ways, yet it's very different, but like it reminds me, it just gives me the same feels in terms of how quickly I fell into the world and was just in love with the characters. Literally in the first chapter, was it the first chapter? Yeah, I'm pretty sure the first chapter, when you're introduced into Misaki and her sister-in-laws, I actually teared up. I was tearing up Megan Lunch. The way that Misaki was describing their sisterhood and their bond and how much joy these women bring her at an especially dark time that she was going through, and like her relationship with her husband isn't necessarily a relationship of love, so it seems it's more a relationship of kind of politics. So it's really interesting to hear about her relationship with her husband, or really lack thereof, and the sisterhood that she has with her sister-in-laws, and just the way that she talks about them was, I don't know, it just got me. I was tearing up. I loved Misaki from that moment. So I'm excited to see more of her story, because from what I know about Sword of Kaigen is that Misaki is a badass. And I think we're just about to learn that, because I'm on page 140 and you're going into a chapter where it's in the past, Misaki's past specifically, and I'm just ready to see her be a badass. Anyway, I'm gonna pause watching The Wheel of Time for right now and listen to The Sword of Kaigen while I play Animal Crossing, because I just got the audiobook for this, and then I'll probably finish episode 3 later tonight and then watch the rest tomorrow, because I think there's only 5 episodes out and they come out like every Friday or something. Maybe? I don't know. It's been raining all day. The sun actually just came out, but it's like 3:30, so the sun's gonna set soon. But I wanted to come on here and update because I am a little more than halfway through. I'm on page like 360, or no, I'm on page 334. I think there's 612 pages or something like that in this book, so I'm a little over halfway. This is like my new favorite book. It's interesting because this doesn't have like an intense plot. The plot is not extremely intricate. There is a specific thing happening and it's showing you how it's affecting these characters and like what they've grown up to believe versus what other characters have kind of always known to be true. I would say if anything, this book is extremely character driven, but it sucks you in because there are things that are really interesting about these characters, but also what they're learning in this book is really interesting. So you're following two characters' perspectives. It's a mom and a son. So Misaki is the mom, and in her youth, she trained to be a fighter, but when she decided to get married to a specific family that comes from specific traditions, she gave up her fighting and doesn't talk about it. So actually a lot of people aren't even aware that she is trained in fighting and was probably one of the best fighters of her time. And so she's in a marriage of like political gain, and it's not necessarily political gain for her, because in reality what she's getting out of it is that if she has sons, there's political gain for her sons, and not so much for her. So while it is a marriage of political convenience, it's not necessarily for her. She's kind of sacrificing her autonomy for her children that at the time aren't even existent. And then you follow her eldest son, Mamoru, who is a very skilled fighter, and this is expected of him because of the family that he comes from. He's from the Matsuda family, and all of the men in his family are known to be some of the greatest warriors, but in Kaigen, or the Kaigenese Empire, most men are expected to be warriors of some sort. They're supposed to be trained to be warriors. And in the beginning of this book, Mamoru finds out things about Kaigen and the Kaigenese Empire that go against everything that he's ever been taught, and it kind of tilts his world in a way in which he doesn't expect. And that is the part that really sucked me into this story, is that you have this, I would assume, colonized version of history. Then you start to find out the real history of your people and surrounding areas, and it kind of throws you for a loop, I guess, to put it lightly. And so he is really struggling with that. And that's like what really sucked me into the story. And that's really the beginning of this story. But there is a war looming in the background. But for the first 200 pages of the story, you're actually learning a lot about the characters, character dynamics, about their family, about Kaigenese history, and also history that goes against what the Kaigenese Empire says their history is. And surprisingly for me, I was really attached to the characters right away. I think I said in my last clip that when we met Misaki and she was talking about her sisterhood, it really got to me. It made me very emotional. And as this book has gone on, the relationships in this story are super, super interesting to me. I have no idea where this book is going to go, and I think that's why I'm also really liking it so much, because I have no expectations about this book and where it should go and what I feel like I want it to do. I'm just really invested in the characters, and I hope that the characters are okay. I don't know what kind of writer ML Wang is, so they may be the type of person, the type of author that kills off all their characters. I don't really know. I just know that this is like a devastating story. That's the only thing I really knew going into this. And I know a lot of people love it. I do. It's all I can think about. I haven't had a book in a while where all I want to do is read it. So for the last 2 days, I've been reading it. And I'm a pretty slow physical reader, I feel like. So I go back and forth between the audiobook and reading this physically. And I feel like I'm getting through it way faster than I normally do physically reading. I hate every single person who has ever suggested the Sword of Kaigen to me, because this has ruined my life. And I'm just happy that I buddy read it with Yasmin so that her life was ruined alongside mine. Anyway, we're gonna sit here and talk about Sword of Kaigen while I play Animal Crossing and wait for my oven to heat up, because I'm cooking chicky nuggies. And I don't have like much more to say about the Sword of Kaigen. I loved it. I gave it 5 stars. And sometimes I have a really hard time articulating why I love a book so much. I think in this case, it's the character arcs. I really love character arcs. I love character growth. And I think something that benefited me was, surprisingly, I went into this book not knowing that much about it. I think my assumptions of the book were that it would be like a war-torn country and there would be some sort of political intrigue happening and probably something that was tearing a family apart. I don't know. I don't really know what I expect sometimes of standalone fantasy, because I typically read series, and a lot of the series spans over maybe years, and there's a lot of political intrigue, there's a lot of conflict and war or impending war. So I don't know exactly what I expected of a standalone fantasy, and it definitely wasn't this. And I think that like if you go into this expecting a certain buildup, because I think the book leads you to believe that this is going to be about this impending war and there's going to be a lot of political machinations happening. That's not what's happening here. Surprisingly, this is almost like a character study of Misaki in general. This is, to me, Misaki's story, and I just loved her character arc, and I loved the character arc of a lot of the people that are close to her. I think this makes such interesting commentary on colonization, propaganda, on war, the aftermath of war, and how we move on from situations like war. You know, what are you supposed to do? And I just really love the way it's done, but I do think that if you are not somebody who enjoys slow burn, character driven fantasy, this probably won't be for you. I've seen a few reviews. I got a few messages about the Sword of Kaigen where people were disappointed because they thought it was going somewhere else. And I do think that the book leads you to believe that it is going to go in a different direction. I read the synopsis after the fact, so I do think you could have a wrong impression of where the story is going to go, but it's a character driven story. It's really about specifically Misaki, but like there are other characters involved that you get perspectives of, and they have interesting arcs as well. But like, I was so invested in Misaki's story. So this is 100% one of my favorite books of the year. What's hilarious about this is, obviously at the beginning of this video I said this was for January. It was starting in January, and it's supposed to be, but I figured it would take me quite a while because I had other books I was reading, and then I just got way too invested in it and finished it early. So I mean, it is what it is, because God knows I'm not finishing this book in December. If I do, I will be shocked. But I did want to update you also that I am 127 pages in, and I'm actually liking it. And I say that because it's not that I've made it like a secret or anything. I just never really have had the opportunity to talk much about Brandon Sanderson. I think I have read one of his books while I've been on BookTube, which was Mistborn. I did enjoy it, but I was never compelled to move on with that series. And I think that if you've read Mistborn, you might know why, or you might understand why, is that it kind of ends in a way that like, it feels like a complete book. It feels like a standalone book. Obviously there are things in there that happen that easily make it into a series, I'm sure, but like, it does feel complete by the time you finish Mistborn in a lot of ways. So I've never been compelled to pick up the rest of the series. I also hear really mixed things about the second book, like it's the weakest book in the series. So I've been hesitant because I don't love or hate Brandon Sanderson. I just feel kind of whatever about him. But everybody says that this is like his life's work. I don't know. It's his life's work, whatever that means. But anyway, I really have liked what I've read so far. I don't know that much about the characters. Right now you're following Kaladin and Shallan. Is that her name? Pretty sure her name is Shallan. And they're really interesting to me. I like both of their storylines pretty equally right now. For a minute there, Kaladin was more interesting to me. And then Shallan revealed something in her plot that I was like, okay. And I will admit that I woke up this morning really wanting to read more. So that's what I'm going to do for the rest of today. I'm going to continue listening. I just think it's almost ridiculous. Like, it's almost disgusting that I'm 127 pages in and it's not even like close to a quarter of the way into this book. It's gross, if you ask me. Hello, excuse my face. I just finished cleaning my whole house and it feels really good because I haven't had a lot of time to like deep clean in the last month, and so I did that today. Anyway, the reason I'm updating is because I was watching Erin's live and I was telling her about how I'm halfway through The Way of Kings finally. She was asking me who my favorite characters were and then said, why is it Dalinar and Adolin? Is that how you say his name? Adolin? Adolin? I don't like Adolin. And when I told her that I don't actually like Adolin, she said that everybody loves him and now I need answers. Do y'all really like him? And is this something that happens later in the series? Because I think he is so whiny. He's so whiny. He's whiny. Please let me know. Hello. It has been a long journey, but we've made it, Joe. We made it halfway through The Way of Kings, so I'm like 600 pages, so I'm actually more than halfway because I think the book is 1001 pages. So technically I am further than halfway, but regardless, we made it. We did it. We got here. I feel like I've been reading this book forever, but it's mainly because I don't read it consistently. I've been taking breaks between, not because I'm not enjoying it, just because life. But I do have to say, even though I know that each book gets bigger, like significantly bigger, like hundreds of pages bigger, I really don't know that this book needed to be this long, which makes me question, like, do the other books need to be this long? The answer is probably no, but I am having a good time. I really am enjoying learning about this world, and surprisingly, the interludes and like the structure of this book isn't bothering me as much as I thought it would. Because to be quite honest, in some fantasy books, I think they put in interludes or like those like little paragraphs at the beginning of chapter that's supposed to be from something, like some religion or some diary or some historical thing from the past. They put it at the beginning of each chapter and it's supposed to have some significance, and then in the end I feel like it doesn't really have a significant impact on the story, you know what I'm saying? But here I feel like it's definitely going to have an impact on the story just because The Way of Kings is an actual book, and I think most of this is pulling from that. So I feel like it's all going to come together just because there's a lot of historical context within the story in general. Sadly, for me, I'm not super attached to Shallan or Kaladin, and they're the like primary character POVs that you get in this first book. I really love Dalinar, and I think he is such an interesting and complex character. And Kaladin is as well, but I don't know if it's just because I'm not super attached to him that his storyline, while complex and like relatively interesting, I'm not like that into it, you know? But sadly, Shallan at the beginning was one of the storylines where I was like, ooh, I'm really interested in this, and now I don't want to be in her POV. Every time we get to her POV, I'm like, okay, here we go. Anyway, I'm going to keep reading. I don't think I'm going to do any more updates until I finish this book, but I think I'm also going to finally start Noor, and I don't know. I feel like that's a book I can read in just a few days, but I'm not in the mood for it right now. So I thought about this after the fact because somebody had messaged me on Instagram and asked me if I read Warbreaker, and after I had already picked a Noor for this video, I was like, I should have picked Warbreaker, but it would have made this significantly longer. So only the first installment of this video series, and I'm already gonna DNF a book. I'm DNFing Noor. I have been trying to read this for a week. if not longer. I don't understand what's going on in this book. I've tried reading it physically. I've tried listening to it on audiobook. I cannot grasp this plot to save my life. And I actually went and read a few reviews, and a lot of the 3-star reviews have the same exact feelings that I'm feeling right now, which is just the plot being all over the place and not being able to really understand what the point of this book is, but also sort of enjoying the characters and the world. And it's really sad because I've read all but like 3 or 4 Nnedi Okorafor books, and usually I land within a 4 or 5 stars. Like anytime I think of my favorite speculative fiction, science fiction books, it's usually Nnedi Okorafor's work. And I don't know if it's partly, you know, the plot situation, but also because of the subject matter, which is artificial intelligence, although in this case it's called artificial organisms because somebody can be considered not human if they have enough implants, even though these implants are often used to like save people's lives in this book. But anyway, the subject matter of artificial intelligence is not my favorite thing to read about. I don't mind it when it's a part of the story, but when it's the story as a whole, I tend to not care, which is why I hesitate to pick up the Murderbot Diaries, even though I think it's like a different vibe than most artificial intelligence stories. But anyway, yeah, I don't know if that's like part of my problem, is that I don't like reading about this subject solely, and it really is about artificial intelligence. And like obviously other things, because Nnedi Okorafor often talks about like environmental issues, etc., etc. But yeah, I'm not sure if that's my problem or if it really is just all over the place. I don't know. I'm DNFing it for now. It's not a hard DNF. I hope to come back to it at another point in time, but I think the other part of my issue is I'm just not in the mood to read this right now. I'm not in the mood to read like science fiction-y thing. Somebody is at my door, so anyway, I'm going to commit my time to finishing Way of Kings because I've had 300 pages of Way of Kings to read for the last like week and a half, maybe. I'm gonna finish it in the next 2 days. I'm committing. I finished The Way of Kings. Now, we're not going to talk about the fact that I did start this project in December, and that's mainly because I wanted to introduce this whole concept in January. So I cheated a little bit, okay? But I finished this book. I did not give a lot of updates about this book, and I'm realizing that because I've been editing the footage for the last couple of days, and I realize it's because I don't know how to talk about this book. It is such an epic high fantasy with a lot of different characters, although you are following in this book 3 specific main POVs. There are interludes that have other POVs that in some cases I don't really know how they're going to play into the story, but in other cases some of the interlude POVs are very pivotal to the catalysts within this story. There's a really intense magic system in here, and from what I understand, Warbreaker, which I think Brandon Sanderson published it about 2009 or around there, has a magic system that will be introduced in this series. I do know that like the Cosmere, it's all one thing, but Warbreaker and this series actually have something to do with each other more than just being in the Cosmere. So I am going to read that next, actually, because I did really like this, and I think I'm giving it a solid 4 stars because I said it in the beginning, I don't know that this needed to be as long as it is, but even though I do feel like this could have been shorter and I would have been fine with it being shorter, I do understand what Brandon Sanderson is trying to do here. This is supposed to be Brandon Sanderson's like epic saga, his Wheel of Time, his Lord of the Rings. Like that's what this is supposed to be. So I understand why it's so long. I understand what he was doing here, and to be honest, I actually think he's doing an amazing job with this series because I find myself wanting to be in this world, and I 100% feel ready to like continue with this series, which as a matter of fact, I put the audiobook for the second book on hold at the library, and it's a little bit of a wait, and Warbreaker was available, so I'm going to read Warbreaker and then move on with Words of Radiance and see where we go from there. It's hard for me to describe this book because there's so many moving pieces, but like I said, you have 3 main POVs. You have Kaladin, and Kaladin is a slave, and he is somebody that you know hasn't always been a slave, and so you start to get his story about how he came to this point in his life. And then you have Dalinar, and Dalinar is the brother to the king who was assassinated, and after his brother's assassination, his nephew became king. And he is trying to protect his nephew, and he's trying to figure out what happened with his brother while also trying to protect his nephew. And there's this added element of the fact that before his brother got assassinated, there were these weird visions that his brother was having, the king was having, and people were starting to get really worried about him. So Dalinar and his sons are kind of concerned that maybe that was part of the reason that he was assassinated. And then you have Shallan's perspective, and Shallan's perspective is one that I don't want to say too much about because I didn't know a lot about her perspective going into it, but she basically wants to work under this woman who can cast magic, basically. And she wants to work under this woman and basically be her ward. I can't think of the word right now that they were calling it, but she, she wants to learn from her. And I know in a previous update, I had said that I was really liking Shallan and then she kind of became annoying to me. Kaladin I wasn't super attached to, and then Dalinar was my favorite perspective. And what's interesting is that by the time you get to the end of this book, you have a respect for each and every one of these characters, whether or not you're attached to them. And I really felt that way because while I don't love Kaladin's perspective, like I don't have any deep connection to him as a character right now, I can see myself having a connection to him as a character, and I have a lot of respect for him as a character. And I know that some people have said they started out not really liking him, and then by the 4th book they do really like him. And I already know that Shallan is a fan favorite. I don't know how people feel about Dalinar. He's my favorite, and I don't see that changing. I just think he's such an interesting character, and I think what was happening to him in the story was like the most compelling storyline for me, and just the way he is changing as a character, the way he reacts to people. And he is also funny. I could definitely see why you could get obsessed with Brandon Sanderson because I really, really thought I was not going to enjoy this as much as I did. And I will say, like, the 4 stars comes from the fact that the middle of this book kind of dragged for me, and it was a little harder for me to want to pick it up in the middle of reading it. But once I did pick it up, and every time I did pick it up after like kind of feeling bored and not sure how I was feeling about the book, as soon as I would start reading it, I would get sucked back into the world and be interested all over again. Also, one of the things that felt like slightly overwhelming when reading this book is that there's a lot going on and a lot of it's confusing, but Yasmin told me to just stick with it because it all makes sense in the end, and she wasn't wrong. I feel like the majority of the big questions that you have in here get answered by the end. Obviously not all of the questions are going to be answered because that's why it's a series, but a lot of the major questions and confusion that I had at the beginning to middle of this book started to slowly get answered by the last like half/quarter of this book. It also ends on a cliffhanger-ish, so I can't imagine. It's 2010. This book just comes out. You read it and you're left with that ending. This is why I don't read things until like there are at least multiple books out. I don't want to suffer like that. So that was the first installment of Read It Down. Despite my DNF, I do feel like this was really successful, and I found 2 new books that I really, really loved. I technically get to buy books in February because the DNF doesn't count towards like not completing what I'm doing, it doesn't count. Did I say that in the beginning? DNFs don't count. Thank you again, Yasmin, for picking these 2 books for me. I think that this is a good start because I loved both of them, and maybe next time I'll pick better for myself. I'm thinking now I should probably like have them battle it out in the end, see who picked the best books in what month. Something to think about. Anyway, let me know if you've read any of these books, how you liked them, if you want to read them. Let me know if you like this series concept, and I will talk to you next time. Bye!